When we think about a church's mission, our minds usually go to the spiritual side of things, right? But what about the money? How a church actually handles its finances says a ton about its real priorities. It's so much more than just accounting. It's like a direct window into its stewardship, its responsibility, and whether it's truly living out its purpose.
I mean, we've all seen it. The offering plate being passed around. That money is supposed to keep the church running. But what happens after that? Where that money actually goes? Well, that's the real story. And it brings up a really important question.
So this is the big question we're going to unpack today. Once all that money is collected, what are a church's genuine biblical and ethical duties? I can tell you it goes way beyond just keeping the lights on.
We're going to break this down into 4 key areas. First up, caring for the flock. That's the church's own members. Then we'll talk about looking beyond the walls to the community. After that, answering a higher calling to God. And finally, we'll get to the ultimate bottom line, where some really tough choices have to be made.
Okay, so the number one responsibility is to care for the flock, the people right there in the church. And to really get this, we've got to go back all the way back to the very first church, the one started on the day of Pentecost. The way they did things set an incredibly powerful example for everyone who came after. Just listen to how strong and clear that language is. There were no needy persons among them. Whoa, that wasn't just some nice goal they were aiming for, it was a reality they were living. The early church literally used their collective money to wipe out poverty within their own group. And this wasn't just a one-time thing. If you read the book of Acts, you see this pattern over and over. They were handing out money, setting up systems to feed widows, even sending financial help to other churches that were struggling. The big takeaway here is that taking care of their own was absolutely fundamental to who they were. But here's the thing. Caring for the flock is just the starting line. A healthy church just can't be totally focused on itself. And that brings us to the second pillar of financial responsibility, looking past its own walls and out into the community around it. Now, this verse from Galatians is so key because it sets up a really clear but balanced priority. The mission is to do good for everybody, but there's a special focus on fellow believers first. So it's not an either-or situation, it's a both-and, but with a definite starting point. So what does this outward focus actually look like day to day? Well, you can think of it as a 3-step process. It kicks off right at home, doing good in the local community. Then it expands to sharing the message through evangelism. And finally, it goes global by actively funding and sending out missionaries to take that message to the rest of the world. And this leads us to a massive warning sign. Just look at this chart. When that bar for member needs, internal programs and comforts, starts getting really tall, while the bar for outreach just shrinks, that's a visual sign of a church that's starting to lose its way. Church consultant Tom Rainer really doesn't mince words here. He basically says this financial trend is like an autopsy report waiting to happen. A church that stops looking and spending beyond its own walls is a church that's starting to die. It's a powerful modern-day take on that ancient biblical principle. Okay, so we've covered the members and the community. Now we get to the third and really the highest level of accountability. A church isn't just responsible to people. At the end of the day, it's responsible to God to actually carry out its main mission. And what is that mission exactly? Well, it's making sure the gospel is delivered, the word is preached, and the core message of Christianity is proclaimed. Any dollar spent that helps achieve that primary goal should get top priority. That's the real spiritual return on investment. Of course, to fulfill that mission, you need people to do the work. And that's exactly where this verse comes in. It makes it really clear that paying pastors and teachers isn't just some administrative task. It's a biblical command. It's a necessary investment to make sure the whole mission can actually succeed. So there you have it, the 3 pillars: care for the flock, look beyond the walls, and answer that higher calling. But knowing what to do is one thing. Putting it into practice in the real world, that's not a simple checklist. It's a constant balancing act that requires a ton of wisdom. And this right here is the heart of the problem. As you can see on the scale, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a nice, well-kept building. That's a good thing. But is it the better thing? See, every dollar that goes into fancy facilities is a dollar that can't go to missions or helping out churches that are really struggling. We're not talking about choices between good and bad, but between good and best, and that's where true wisdom comes in. So when you're facing all these complicated choices, where do you look for a guide?
Well, it probably helps to go right back to where we started, that very first church. The book of Acts tells us they devoted themselves to just four things: teaching, fellowship, breaking bread, and prayer. That's it. A simple, powerful, and incredibly focused list.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty big question to think about. With all the complexity of a modern church budget, maybe the wisest thing to do is to always ask, how does every single line item, every single expense serve one of these four foundational purposes? It's definitely something to chew on.